Alexander sat alone in the silent room, the dim glow of the desk lamp casting soft light over scattered papers of little importance. His hand brushed against old photographs, faded memories of a time long past. Everything in the room remained still, but this silence was what made him feel as if he were sinking into an endless void. This emptiness was not a fleeting moment. It had become a state of being, embedded into his daily life since the war. Now, there was no laughter, no conversation, only the sound of his own sighs and restless dreams. He was a soldier who had survived, a psychologist who had once helped others find meaning in their lives. Yet now, he himself was lost. The pain he carried was not just physical, but also deeply rooted in his soul, an anguish beyond words. The war had taken everything from him, his family, his friends, and even the dreams he once held. He lived in a world devoid of real purpose, merely existing, drifting without direction. Tonight, as Alexander prepared to sleep, he received an anonymous letter. The envelope was plain white, bearing only a single sentence. "Your purpose awaits, but you must find it." The words were brief, yet laden with meaning, causing him to pause. His eyes scanned the simple phrase, searching for any clue, but nothing was clear. How could someone know he had lost his sense of purpose before he had even fully realized it himself? Alexander held the letter, studying it for a while. He could not recall ever receiving such a message in all the years following the war. A strange feeling washed over him, an emptiness intertwined with curiosity. Was this the beginning of a journey? A journey to rediscover himself? Or merely a reminder from the past he had desperately tried to bury? The question echoed in his mind, refusing to let him sleep. The weight of loss and uncertainty still clung to him, yet now there was a faint light, a glimmer of hope flickering in the darkness. How could a single letter shift his perception of his own existence? A single thought kept reverberating in his mind. Am I truly ready to find my purpose again? He placed the letter down on the table and stepped outside. The night beyond the window was unchanged, but within him, a vague sense of belief began to take shape. He could no longer continue living in the shadows of his own despair. It was time to face the things left unspoken, the memories buried deep within his consciousness. Alexander's story would not just be a search for meaning. It would be a journey of self-discovery, of choices never made, of a past he could not recall yet remained haunted by its lingering traces. Where would this letter lead him? Would he be able to find the answers to a life that had long since lost its meaning? Everything would begin here. Alexander stood by the window, watching as the weak afternoon sunlight gradually faded. But in his mind, the darkness of the past never seemed to leave. His life now, after the war, was nothing more than a series of dull, empty days where he struggled to get through each moment without joy or real purpose. Day after day, Alexander woke up, ate breakfast alone, and then went to the psychiatric hospital where he worked, a job that no longer brought him any sense of fulfillment. He did it simply because it was the only thing that kept him occupied and distracted from thoughts of the past. Throughout his life, Alexander had always believed that work was a way to find purpose, to help those facing difficulties. But now, after the war, that work had become nothing but monotony. He no longer had the motivation to continue, even though he knew that the patients in the hospital needed his help. Each day, he faced people carrying deep psychological wounds, pain that he could not soothe, stories that he could not change. He listened to their heartbreaking confessions, but when he looked into their eyes, he saw himself, felt the same emptiness in their lives as he did in his own. He recalled the days before the war, when he was still a passionate psychiatrist. Back then, patients came to him seeking comfort, guidance, and a glimmer of hope in the darkness of their fears and suffering. He worked tirelessly, his heart full of dedication and a desire to help. But now, that heart was empty. He no longer had a reason to wake up each day, no reason to live a life filled with hope. He tried to fulfill his duties at work, but the sense of meaninglessness loomed over everything. just like the patients he treated. He felt trapped in a world where all that remained were memories, ghosts of the past, and pain he could not wash away. Every morning, when he looked into the mirror, he no longer saw the man he used to be. A psychiatrist, an optimist, someone full of hope. Now, he only saw a weary, hollow figure with sorrow-filled eyes, as if he had lost everything he once had. His life had become an endless cycle, a loop from which he could not escape, haunted by thoughts of war, of everything that had happened. He vividly remembered the faces of his fallen comrades, the friends who had perished in the attacks, the innocent civilians destroyed by war. And perhaps the greatest pain of all was knowing that he had been powerless to change anything. He had once dreamed of a peaceful world, a life where people could coexist without fear of violence and death. But now, all he had left were memories and emptiness. The wounds of the past followed him like shadows, refusing to release their grip. Every night when he closed his eyes, the images of war, of destruction, returned to his mind, preventing him from sleeping, from finding peace. These memories were not just images of brutal battles, but also of the people he had loved, the people he had lost. He remembered Maria, the woman he had loved in his youth, the one with whom he had built dreams of the future. But war had taken everything away, and he never saw Maria again. She had died in an airstrike, and from that moment on, his life became an endless stretch of meaningless days. He could never forget the moments with Maria, when they planned their future together, when they dreamed of a happy life. But all of it had disappeared, leaving only pain and regret in his heart. At the hospital, Alexander tried to talk to his patients, to help them overcome the psychological wounds they carried. But deep down, he felt like he was living a lie. Everything he did seemed pointless. He couldn't bring them peace because he himself was still searching for a way to escape the memories that had haunted him for years. Every time he spoke with a patient, he asked himself, "What am I doing here? I can help them, but who will help me escape the shadow of war?" One day, as he sat alone in his office, Alexander looked out the window, watching the dark sky and the strong winds sweeping through. In that moment, he felt a deep stillness. The feeling of meaninglessness no longer consumed him. An idea suddenly sparked in his mind. If I can help just one person, maybe I will find a part of myself again. And that was what drove him to continue his work. Even though he no longer believed in anything, he no longer believed in himself, but he decided he would not give up. He would keep helping those who needed him, because only by doing so could he face his own pain. However, no matter how many people he helped, Alexander could not find the answer to the greatest question of his life. What is my purpose? He knew he couldn't live in pain forever, but he didn't know how to escape the darkness within himself. His life remained nothing more than a series of passing days, like ships rushing through a river without a shore. He didn't know where he was going, or if he would ever find his true purpose. Alexander sat by the window in his small apartment, gazing outside through the fogged-up glass, where heavy gray clouds hovered over the bleak sky. Every morning, he had this habit, a way to wake himself from a long sleep filled with emptiness. But each time he did, he felt even more lost. Outside, the weak light of the winter morning could not chase away the cold within him. Another day had begun, yet nothing had changed. The years of war, suffering, and loss had turned Alexander into a stranger to himself. He was no longer the passionate psychologist, no longer the loving husband and father, no longer the close friend to those he cherished. After the war, he was merely a man trapped in a cycle of hazy, hollow memories, an existence without knowing why he was still alive. Since the day his wife died in a car accident, a tragedy rooted in the scars of war, he had lost a crucial part of himself. It felt as though a piece of his life had been torn apart, the fragments impossible to piece back together. His memories of the happy days with his wife were now nothing more than faint glimmers, blurred images. He couldn't even clearly remember why he was here, in this modest apartment, in a noisy city where he found no peace. The fading of Alexander's memories was not something he could easily explain. Sometimes, he wondered if his memories had truly been erased, or if he had chosen to forget a past he no longer wished to recall. In his younger years, he had an unshakable belief in life, in humanity's ability to heal, in the profound meaning of every existence. But now, all those beliefs had crumbled. He couldn't remember the days of happiness with his family. His memories of his wife, the woman he had loved with all his heart, seemed to have vanished from his mind, as if they had never existed. What is my purpose? This question echoed in his mind, an obsession he could not escape. Since his wife's passing, he had never found a satisfying answer. As a psychologist, Alexander understood that searching for meaning in life was essential for every human being. But for him, that meaning seemed buried beneath long nights filled with sorrow and loss. In truth, he no longer knew what to do with his life. He had tried to maintain a normal routine, working at the psychiatric hospital, but with each passing day, he felt even more disconnected. He no longer felt any connection to the patients he cared for, no longer believed he could help anyone find their purpose. He felt like a ghost, existing among the living, but lacking life himself. Since embarking on this journey, Alexander had been relentlessly contemplating his past. In the sleepless nights, as darkness enveloped his room, the memories returned, but they were never clear. Fragmented images, vague sounds. All they did was deepen his pain. Most of all, the memories of his wife, those days together, the loving words exchanged. Now, they felt foreign, like distant dreams he could never grasp. He couldn't even recall the exact circumstances of her death. The events surrounding her passing remained a mystery, buried beneath the dust of time. One day, in a chance conversation with Clara, an old friend he had reconnected with, Alexander heard for the first time a detail he could never forget. Clara told him that before the war, Alexander had been a renowned psychologist known for his progressive therapy methods, and he had helped countless patients rediscover the meaning of their lives. But one day, everything changed. The war had taken too much from him, and when he returned, nothing was the same. People no longer understood him, and most painfully, he no longer understood himself. Clara's story made Alexander begin to doubt. Could it be that his memories were not just lost due to time, but also because of the wrong decisions he had made? Had he unknowingly rejected his past out of fear of facing painful truths? How could he rediscover the meaning of life when he did not even fully understand his own past? Day after day, the question, "What is my purpose?" echoed relentlessly in Alexander's mind. He could not find the answer in the books he read, nor in the conversations he had. Everything seemed vague, as if he were living in a different world where memories and the present no longer had a strong connection. Love, hope, and close relationships had all become things he could no longer grasp. Finally, Alexander decided he had to uncover the truth about his past. He could no longer continue living without a purpose, without any connection to what had come before. He began searching for his lost memories, not only to find an answer to his question about life's meaning, but also to unravel the deep wounds he could not remember. With each step he took, he discovered something new about himself and his past. Stories and people who had once been a part of his life gradually emerged, like incomplete pieces of a puzzle waiting to be put together. Every time he unraveled a part of his history, he felt closer to the answer to the question, "What is my purpose?" But one thing Alexander had never anticipated was that in this journey, he was not only searching for the meaning of life, he was beginning to understand that purpose was not something that could be easily found. Purpose was the act of living itself, the choices and decisions made every day to overcome challenges, to face memories, and to forgive oneself. Alexander's purpose was not a single answer, but an ongoing journey of seeking and discovery, where each step forward was a valuable lesson in itself. In a small room, the dim light from the lamp cast shadows on the empty walls. Alexander sat at a wooden table, his trembling hands flipping through an old journal. Its pages faded with time. It was a book found in an old house, a gift from Clara, who had handed it to him with a cryptic explanation about his past. "Clara," The mysterious woman he had met weeks ago had said it was the journal of Allie, his wife, the woman he had loved and lost in the war. Her last words echoed in his mind. There are things that cannot be forgotten, but there are also memories people choose not to remember. As Alexander opened the journal, he could not help but feel a sense of unease. The brittle pages contained slow, careful handwriting, documenting events he did not recognize. These were not his memories. Instead, the stories within belonged to someone else, a strong and resilient woman, yet deeply wounded. These were not just records of a tragic life. They contained details that Alexander could not comprehend. The accounts of Allie's past left him confused. How could he not remember these memories? The small, strange details in the journal unsettled him, making him feel as if something was terribly wrong. The first chapter of the journal began with Allie's words about the early days of their time together. Sweet stories of long afternoons, leisurely walks, and late-night conversations they had once shared. Each word felt like a reminder, a cherished memory he had somehow abandoned. But as he read further, an eerie feeling crept in. The later entries, though deeply emotional, contained details that he had no recollection of. Allie had written about conversations with another man, someone Alexander did not recognize. How could that be? There was a time when I sat with him, looking into his deep eyes, feeling something both foreign and familiar. I cannot explain it, but I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. A passage from the journal that Alexander could not make sense of. Did he remember this? How could there be another man in Allie's life he never knew about? Confusion and doubt began to cloud Alexander's mind. Why were these memories so different from what he had believed for so long? In Allie's journal, he found a name, a man named Daniel, mentioned in the later pages. Allie wrote that she had met him by chance, someone with whom she felt a deep connection. Alexander felt his heart tighten. Who was Daniel? How could he have never known about this? Had Allie been keeping such a profound secret from him all these years? The following pages only deepened his confusion. Allie wrote about leaving behind her family and loved ones to pursue a path she could not fully explain. A painful event, one that Alexander could not clearly recall, but it seemed to be the reason they had parted ways. A mysterious circumstance, a decision Allie had chosen not to share with him. How was this possible? How could he not remember the choice that had separated them, the last words Allie had spoken to him? A growing sense of unease overwhelmed Alexander. He set the journal down on the table, burying his head in his hands as exhaustion crashed over him. Everything he thought he knew about his past now felt torn apart. The sweet memories of him and Allie, the beautiful love they had shared, now seemed blurred and incomplete. Had he placed too much trust in the memories he had held on to, or was someone deliberately hiding a great truth about his past? Alexander began to recall the times Clara had mentioned another man, someone she had never clearly identified, but who was undeniably connected to his and Allie's past. Clara had once said, "There are truths that a person cannot know, things that memory can conceal." That sentence kept echoing in his mind, making him feel increasingly confused and unsettled. Everything seemed obscure, as if a veil of fog had descended over his past, and he could not find a way through it. One afternoon, as the golden hues of sunset streamed through the window, Alexander made a decision. He had to meet Clara. He could no longer live with these uncertainties. Did Clara know something he had never been told? Could she help him decipher the strange details in Allie's journal? There was only one person who could provide the answers: Clara. When he met her, she looked at him with a contemplative gaze, as if she had been expecting this question all along. Clara did not say much, but in her eyes, Alexander saw the weight of an unspoken truth. "All you need to do is accept the truth," Clara said. "A part of your past has been hidden, and that is what you must face." But she offered no further explanation. She only insisted that he must seek the truth for himself, from the memories he had tried so hard to forget. Tension swelled in Alexander's chest. he knew that his journey to uncover the truth was only just beginning. Everything he had once believed about his past was crumbling, and the story he had to confront would not be as simple as he had thought. The mysteries of his own life would have to be unraveled, no matter the cost. But Alexander also realized something crucial. No matter how the truth revealed itself, he could not continue living in doubt and concealed memories. To reclaim his sense of purpose, he would have to face his past, not just to resolve these mysteries, but to understand the deeper meaning of his life. Alexander sat in his office, the cold wind blowing in through the window. Despite the clear skies outside, the atmosphere in the room was eerily silent. He stared intently at the old notebook Clara had given him that morning. The scribbled handwriting in the journal passed before his eyes like distant memories, unreachable, elusive. His heart pounded in his chest. A heavy weight pressed upon him. Each time he turned a new page in the journal, each time he read about a past he could not recall, a part of his mind surged with doubt. What is happening to me? Why don't I remember any of this? The questions echoed in his head, like waves crashing against his consciousness, pulling him into a void from which there was no escape. The words in the journal made him feel as if he was being pushed toward a new horizon, where the truth was beginning to unravel. He had once been a psychologist, yet he could not remember anything about his previous work. He could not recall helping hundreds of patients, resolving complex psychological issues, or even memorable conversations with colleagues. Strangely, memories of his career, his sessions with patients, everything seemed non-existent in his mind. But now, as he read through the journal, he realized a truth he could not accept. A part of him had been erased, a part he had never wanted to remember. "Alexander, you can't go on like this." A voice inside him rang out like a warning. He recalled conversations in the therapy room, the advice he had given to patients struggling with profound psychological distress. That same voice cut through his mind like a sharp blade. When facing the truth, the most important thing is to never let the past control the present. Yet here he was, trapped in the very same cycle he had warned others about. His memories, his most important life experiences, were slipping away. He felt like a stranger in his own existence, unable to recall major events, unable to remember the wife he had loved, his closest friends, or the pivotal decisions he had made. The storm within him grew fiercer. How could he continue living when his past had been erased? He felt as though a crucial part of himself had been stolen, as if everything he had built and every choice he had made had lost all meaning. Could he ever find himself again? Or would he be swallowed by the haze of memories that could never be restored? Determined to find answers, Alexander sought out an old friend, a former colleague who had worked alongside him at a psychology clinic. This friend, named Mark, was the only person who might help him understand what had happened. That evening, they met at a quiet cafe. Alexander felt nervous, but he knew this was his only chance to uncover the truth. "Mark, I need to ask you something," Alexander began, his voice unsteady. I can't remember my past. Everything I did, everything I went through, I can't recall any of it." Mark looked at him, his expression complicated, as if he was weighing something deeply. After a moment, he exhaled and said, "Alexander, you can't remember because you chose to forget. You erased those memories yourself because you couldn't face the truth about a mistake in your past." "What happened?" Alexander asked, his voice tightening. Mark didn't answer right away. He stared down at the table, as if searching for the right words. Words that would not come easily. Finally, he spoke. "You faced something devastating, Alexander. A decision you could never forgive yourself for. You lost someone very important in your life, and to survive, you chose to erase all memories of them, of that event. But now, as everything resurfaces, those memories are coming back to haunt you." Alexander felt as if the entire world was collapsing beneath his feet. Mark's words hit him like a powerful shock, leaving him unable to think clearly. He questioned himself. Had he really done that? Had he truly erased the most important memories of his life just because he couldn't bear the pain? He rose from his chair, his hands trembling. Fragments of memories, fleeting, scattered, began to surface in his mind. He recalled a dark night, a grave mistake, and the absence of someone he had deeply loved. But the memories were too blurred, too fragmented to form a complete picture.
Mark, I can't remember. I can't remember what I did, Alexander said in desperation.
Mark looked at him with sympathetic eyes. That's why you have to face the truth. You can't keep running from it forever. It's time to confront what happened. After that conversation, Alexander felt as if a painful part of his past had been laid bare. Something he had desperately tried to bury. Though he still couldn't recall everything, he at least understood one thing. Memories weren't something that could simply be erased. What had happened still lingered within him, and whether he wanted to or not, he had to face it. The next day, Alexander made a decision. He would return to the place where he had once lived with his late wife. He went back to the old house, the place filled with sweet memories but also deep sorrow. He didn't know what he would find there, but he knew one thing. He could no longer live in denial. As he stepped into the old house, he looked around and saw the photographs, the old belongings he had once shared with his wife. Every object, every painting was a piece of the memory he had abandoned. Taking a deep breath, he told himself that it was time to confront the truth. "Hello, my love," he whispered, his eyes settling on the dining table where they had once shared their meals. "I'm sorry for everything." Though his memories remained faded, the emotions, the love and the loss still lived on in his heart. And no matter how many years had passed, Alexander realized that facing the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way for him to truly keep living. Since Alexander began searching for the truth about his past, he had been drawn into an inescapable vortex. The unclear memories, the vague conversations, and the strange signs gradually surfaced, making him feel as if he were lost in a mysterious labyrinth. Every time he thought he was close to an answer, another door would open, and new questions would arise. It felt like chasing a ghost. No matter how fast he ran, it always evaded him. Everything started when Alexander received a letter from Clara, the woman who had helped him uncover the lost pieces of his memory. In the letter, Clara mentioned an event from his past that he had no recollection of, a decision that he himself had made, a decision that had changed the lives of many. Clara's words were cryptic, but one thing was certain. The truth he was searching for was not just about what had happened in his own life, but it also affected the lives of those around him, especially his old friends. Alexander couldn't stop thinking about that letter. Clara had reminded him of old friends he had lost touch with long ago, a group of people with whom he had shared his university years, when they were all filled with passion and a desire to change the world. But then, when the war broke out, everything changed. The friends he once considered kindred spirits were now just faded memories in his mind. Their relationships had gradually been forgotten, overshadowed by the pain and loss that the war had brought. But now, those memories were no longer distant ghosts. They were clues, pieces of a puzzle that needed to be found to unlock the truth about his past. Alexander decided to track down each of his old friends, hoping they could provide some hints to help him understand the truth Clara had alluded to. But each meeting left him with more questions than answers. These friends, now older and living their own lives, seemed reluctant to delve into the past. They dodged his questions, and when Alexander mentioned events he couldn't remember, they grew uneasy, even fearful. "I don't think you want to know, Alexander," said David, an old friend, when asked about the incident that had erased his memories. "It's something none of us want to remember." David had once been Alexander's closest friend. They had spent their youth together, dreaming and fighting for their ideals. But now, seeing David's furrowed brows as he spoke of the past, Alexander felt as if a dark wave was swallowing him whole. He couldn't stop thinking about David's words. "I don't think you want to know." They sounded like a warning, forcing him to reflect on what had happened and why his old friends refused to talk about it. Next, Alexander met with Sarah, another former classmate who had been particularly close to Clara. When he brought up the letter and the events of the past, Sarah remained silent for a long time before simply saying, "Everything has changed. Alexander, we can't go back to what once was." But unlike his other friends, Sarah didn't avoid his questions. Instead, she made him feel that something much bigger was being kept hidden, something he needed to uncover to understand why everyone was staying silent. Gradually, Alexander realized that his journey wasn't just about uncovering the truth about his past. It was also a battle to reclaim lost relationships and to bring to light the things he had chosen to forget. His old friends, whether they avoided him or answered vaguely, were all tied to the choices he had made. And those choices were leading him toward a truth he could never have imagined. One evening, as Alexander walked down a familiar street where he and his old friends used to wander, he suddenly sensed something was off. There was an unspoken tension in the air, a feeling that something was wrong. He stepped into an old cafe where he and Clara had once talked about the future, and the moment he entered, a chilling atmosphere enveloped him. The barista looked at him strangely but said nothing. Alexander sat down near the window, but instead of feeling familiarity, he felt like a stranger. This time, when he asked about Clara, the barista responded with visible unease. Clara left a long time ago. She didn't want anyone to know where she was going. That revelation hit Alexander like a weight on his chest. Clara, the one who had stirred his memories, the one who had set him on this path to rediscovering his purpose, had now mysteriously disappeared. Every clue he had found, every piece of the puzzle he had painstakingly tried to fit together, still couldn't explain why Clara had done this. She knew something that he didn't, and she didn't want him to find out. With every step he took, Alexander felt himself being pulled deeper into a maze with no exit. It felt as if he were facing a mystery far greater than he had ever imagined. His memories, the events of the past, all seemed impossible to decipher. And his old friends, the people who had once been closest to him, were becoming more enigmatic by the day. Inside him, the questions kept swirling. Why is everything being kept secret? Can I uncover the truth without losing everything? The pain weighed heavily on Alexander's heart as he stood before the mirror, reflecting on every step he had taken in his life. Throughout the years, he had believed that he had lived a meaningful life, that his decisions had always been rational, that every action he had taken had served a greater purpose. But now, all he could see was an emptiness, an unspoken failure he had never acknowledged. Ever since his conversation with Clara had sparked the first signs of doubt, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. The unanswered questions about his past, about the choices he had faced, without realizing their consequences, haunted him. In the dead of night, when everything was silent except for the turmoil in his own heart, Alexander began delving deeper into his memories, searching for the traces that had been buried for so long. He recalled the years before the war, back when he was a young psychiatrist working at a major hospital. In those early days, he had been filled with passion and hope for his work. He believed that his profession could change people's lives, that he could help them overcome their mental anguish and find peace within themselves. But perhaps what he had failed to realize was that the blindness in his own decisions had led him into situations he could never undo. One of the most significant choices, one that he only now realized was a mistake, was his refusal to participate in an important study on mental health. That research could have helped him understand human psychology better and the suffering that his patients endured. He had had reasonable excuses for declining. He was too busy, too mentally exhausted. But the consequences of that decision were now unbearable to face. Because of it, his patients had not received the support they desperately needed, and some had suffered longer than they should have. He wondered, if he had agreed to take part in the study, could he have saved lives? The cost of hesitation had been too high, and now there was no way to turn back. The memories of those past failures only made Alexander feel worse when he realized that, all this time, he had been running away from his responsibilities. He had tried to bury his mistakes by throwing himself into work, creating a facade to hide the wounds within. But now, confronted with the truth about himself, he could no longer escape the guilt that surged within him. Alexander's past was not only defined by the wrong choices he had made in his career. A deeper part of him, one he had always avoided, was his relationship with his late wife, Emma. They had fallen in love when they were young, and the years they spent together were the happiest of his life. However, When the war came, he had been forced to confront a profound change within himself. He was no longer the man Emma had loved. He had grown distant, cold, detached from the emotional needs of the woman who had once meant everything to him. Their life together began to fracture, and even though Emma had tried to hold on, he could never bring himself to truly open up to her. When Emma died in a sudden accident, Alexander couldn't help but wonder if things could have been different. If he had listened to her more, if he hadn't drowned himself in work and negativity, could he have saved their relationship? Could he have been the husband she needed him to be? The most painful realization Alexander faced was not the loss of his career or his family, but the understanding that he had neglected the most important things in his life: his connection to the people he loved and to himself. He had allowed his past mistakes to cloud his ability to recognize the true value of love, sacrifice, and choice. That night, as Alexander sat alone in the darkened room, the memories he had tried to suppress slowly resurfaced. He recalled Emma's words in the final months of their life together. "You can save others, but you can't save yourself if you keep running from your own emotions." At the time, Alexander hadn't fully grasped the meaning of her words. But now, he realized that they had been a warning about the life he had chosen. A life without true meaning, a life spent running from himself. Now that the truth had come to light, Alexander faced a crucial decision. Could he forgive himself and accept the mistakes of his past, or would he continue living in guilt and pain, unable to find his own purpose? He could choose to remain trapped by his past, or he could begin the journey of healing the wounds within his soul and starting anew. The past had shown Alexander that, while he couldn't change what had happened, he could choose how he faced it. He realized that his mistakes and regrets had shaped him, had made him understand himself more deeply. But in order to move forward, he had to learn to accept those mistakes, to forgive himself and those around him. Most importantly, he had to find meaning not in success or failure, but in the act of living fully, embracing what he had in the present. With the truth finally unveiled, Alexander understood that no matter how many mistakes he had made, they did not define him. Only he could create his own purpose, and his journey toward self-discovery would begin the moment he stopped running and chose to face his past head-on. Alexander stood silently before the door, his hands trembling, his heartbeat pounding in his chest. He could feel the coldness of the space around him, not the cold of winter, but the cold that came from within his soul. He had endured countless days of pain, but today, a crucial decision awaited him, a decision that would change everything. Before him stood the old house, a place that had witnessed countless memories throughout his life, a place where his memories had once been built upon days of peace before the war had taken everything away. This house was not just a place where he had lived. It was a vault holding all the secrets he had tried so hard to bury, the memories that would never fade, the mistakes he could never forget, the choices he had to face and take responsibility for. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The door creaked softly as it opened, as if welcoming back a part of the past that had long been forgotten. Inside, everything remained untouched. The chairs, the paintings on the walls, the scent of the room. It all carried traces of time, but everything had changed. He had changed. And today, he was no longer the Alexander he once was. He walked to the large table where a framed family photo rested. In the picture was the woman he had loved more than himself, and a child he had once dreamed of watching grow up. But war had stolen these dreams, leaving him with wounds that could never heal. A soft noise from behind made him turn. Clara, the only friend left in his life, stood at the doorway. Her eyes were filled with sadness, as if she had known this moment would come. Clara was the only one who truly understood him, who understood the pain he carried. But she also knew there was a truth he had been avoiding for years. She knew there could only be one way this ended. "Are you ready to face it?" Clara asked, her voice filled with both sympathy and challenge. "The truth is never easy, Alexander, but if you don't face it, you'll be trapped in darkness forever." Alexander didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at the photo in his hands. He knew he couldn't run anymore. Facing the truth was the only way to heal the wounds inside him. He had lived in denial for too long, but now, that was no longer an option. "It was me, wasn't it?" he said, his eyes clouded with guilt. "I was the one who lost everything, no one else." Clara stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No one said you have to carry this burden alone, but there are truths you must face, so you don't have to live in pain anymore." She was right. The truth Alexander had to confront was his past choices, the decision he had made when he was young, when he abandoned his family to chase misguided ideals. That decision had not only shattered his family, but it also cost him the people he loved the most. When the war began, Alexander had been a young, passionate psychiatrist. But in war, everything changed. He lost his wife and son in an airstrike, and those memories had haunted him ever since. After losing everything, Alexander turned his back on the past, deciding he no longer needed to face the pain. He had chosen to bury it all, but that had only left him feeling emptier. That choice had cost him his very identity. But now, standing before the truth, he could no longer escape it. The price of forgetting was too high, and he had paid for it with years of self-inflicted torment. "Clara, I can't go back," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "I've lost everything. I failed to do the right thing. I couldn't protect my family." Clara looked at him, silent for a moment, then sighed. "But you still have a chance, Alexander. A chance to face the truth, to stop living with regret. Forgive yourself before it's too late." Her words struck him like a slap. The story of his loss, his past mistakes, they had haunted him for so many years. But now, he realized that forgiveness, true forgiveness, was the only key to setting himself free. But to do that, he had to face the person he had hurt the most, his wife, the woman he had abandoned. This decision would be the hardest he had ever made. Though he knew he could never change the past, he also knew he had to be honest with himself, and that meant confronting the people he had hurt. After a long silence, Clara spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "Go seek forgiveness, Alexander. Find the truth, even if it hurts, because only then will you be able to truly live." Alexander knew there was no turning back. He was ready to face his past, and no matter how painful it would be, he would see this journey through to the end. He turned to Clara, giving her a faint smile, then stepped out of the house, not to run, but to find himself once again. This journey was not an ending, but the beginning of a new life. A life where he could forgive himself and those around him. A life where he no longer feared facing the past, but instead accepted his mistakes and chose to move forward. Because in the darkest moments of life, only then does one truly understand the meaning of existence. And Alexander was ready to embrace it. How long had it been since Alexander last felt he was living with purpose? That each passing day was a step forward, a path leading him to the right decisions, to actions that brought peace to his soul. In that moment, sitting in his study, surrounded by old books and unfinished notes, Alexander realized that everything he had done over the years was merely an attempt to seek meaning from the outside world, from things he believed would bring him peace and fulfillment. But the truth was entirely different. Throughout his journey, Alexander had encountered many twists and turns, moments of darkness, and flashes of clarity. He had pursued various goals, from helping others through his work in psychology, to seeking understanding and harmony in his relationships. Yet, each time he achieved a small success, he was left with an emptiness that nothing could fill. He could not find meaning in achievements, in social recognition, or even in the people he loved. What he lacked was himself. When he began the journey to recover his lost memories, Alexander unearthed fragments of his past, painful events he had chosen to ignore. He recalled a life-altering mistake, a decision that had distanced him from those who mattered most, costing him precious opportunities. But when he finally faced those memories, he no longer felt the deep regret he once did. He realized that every mistake had its value, and that wrong choices were also part of the journey of growth. It was in accepting himself, his flaws, his imperfections, that he came closer to understanding the meaning of life. That day, as he sat in his small room, surrounded by childhood paintings and scattered journal entries, Alexander suddenly understood that he had spent too long living with unanswerable questions. Who am I? And what am I living for? But now, he knew that the answers were not out there, not in his actions, his work, or his relationships. The answers lay within him. They lay in the acceptance that he was a person with weaknesses, with painful memories. But those very things made him who he was, a human being, imperfect yet full of emotions and passion. He thought about the years he had lived unconsciously, like a boat drifting aimlessly without a rudder. He had overlooked opportunities to confront himself, to truly understand his emotions, his joys, and his sorrows. But now, he knew that nothing was more important than learning to love himself, accepting himself as part of this vast universe, and letting go of the pursuit of perfection. Perfection was not the goal. It was the process of living authentically and wholeheartedly with what he had. One of the most important lessons Alexander learned from his journey was that mistakes were not something to fear, but opportunities to learn and grow. Every mistake, big or small, had shown him the true value of life. And in every wrong decision, he had found ways to start anew, gaining deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. When confronting the painful memories and past mistakes, Alexander realized that he could not change what had happened, but he could change the way he perceived them. Those mistakes were not regrets to dwell on, but experiences to be grateful for, as they had shaped him into the person he was now, stronger, wiser, and more inspired. He understood that in every step, in every choice, whether right or wrong, there was an essential piece of his journey towards self-discovery. In the end, the deepest lesson Alexander learned was to live fully in every moment. We cannot predict the future, but we can embrace the present. He understood that the search for meaning in life was not a journey toward a final goal or outcome, but rather a process of self-discovery and authenticity in each day. Every morning he chose to wake up with gratitude for the simple things around him. Every step on the path of life had value, and nothing was more important than living authentically. He no longer needed to meet anyone else's standards or achieve societal success. All he needed was to know that he was living as the person he wanted to be, a person capable of loving himself, loving others, and finding meaning in every moment of life. Even though Alexander had found his purpose, he realized that life was not only meaningful when lived for oneself, but also when shared with others. Throughout his journey, he had met people who helped him see life and his values from new perspectives. By sharing his story and helping others through their struggles, he found a way to illuminate his own path. He realized that each time he helped someone, each time he contributed to the community, he discovered new meaning in his own existence. Life was not about chasing perfection, but about connecting with others, helping them find their purpose, and together creating positive change in the world. Thank you for accompanying Alexander on his journey to find his purpose. His story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in overcoming pain, loss, and fading memories. It serves as a reminder that purpose is not something we find externally, but something we create from within by living truthfully and embracing what we have. May this story inspire you to find your own purpose. Never forget that every step forward, no matter how small, has meaning, and even mistakes are a vital part of growth. This life is ours, and we have the power to choose how to live it authentically. Alexander's story is not just a physical journey, but a deep voyage into the soul, where love and beautiful memories, though fading with time, never truly disappear. Throughout his life, Alexander had been unable to find meaning in material success, fame, or even his work, things people often seek to feel complete. But when he embarked on his journey to rediscover the meaning of life, he realized that what he truly needed was love. The love in this story is not about indulging in sweet moments or romantic gestures. It is a love built through challenges, hardships, and, at times, the ability to forgive oneself. This love does not need to be perfect. Sometimes, it is simply about being willing to stand by someone's side when they need it most. And throughout his journey, Alexander realized that nothing is stronger than love. It is an invisible force, yet powerful enough to help him confront his fears, unresolved burdens, and even the memories he had tried to bury. Like many in life, Alexander once believed that love was fleeting, a temporary fulfillment of an empty space in the heart. But through his journey of self-discovery, he came to understand that true love is an essential part of human existence. Love does not always come easily. It may arrive in the most difficult moments, in times we could never anticipate. But once love is built on trust, forgiveness, and meaningful milestones, it remains forever. Sacrifice has always been an inseparable part of Alexander's story. Although he did not always understand what he was sacrificing, every decision in life required some form of trade-off. Alexander had to give up many things: his family, his career, and at times, even himself. But more important than what he lost were the lessons he learned from those sacrifices. Sacrifice is not just about letting go of something. It is also a way to search for and understand what truly matters in life. Alexander had sacrificed much of his life to face pain and loss. However, he also realized that sacrifice does not mean giving up everything. Sometimes, sacrifice is about discovering what is most important, finding strength within oneself, and most importantly, learning to forgive oneself. He came to understand that sacrifice is not a lifelong burden one must carry, but an opportunity to reflect and see what truly holds meaning. The sacrifices in this story were not always obvious or easy. They were an essential part of growth and an important lesson in understanding the nature of life. When Alexander learned to sacrifice for others, for something greater than himself, he also learned how to love and forgive himself. Alexander's life was a series of choices. The decisions he made in the past did not always lead to pleasant outcomes. However, each choice became a lesson, helping him realize that people have the ability to change and reshape their lives. This reminds us that while the past cannot be altered, the present and the future are entirely within our control. Alexander faced many critical decisions in his life. Could he continue living with past pain and ignore his mistakes? Or would he choose to step out of the shadows, confront the truth, and create a new life for himself? Choices are not always easy, but each decision provides an opportunity to start anew. Alexander learned that no matter how great the challenges life presents, we always have the power to choose our own path. The key lesson from this story is the understanding of the power of choice. Every decision has the potential to change our direction. A single right decision can open new doors, and sometimes, even a small shift in perspective can lead to unexpected outcomes. One of the most important lessons in Alexander's journey is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not an easy act, especially when we must face the weight of our past mistakes. Alexander had to learn to forgive himself before he could find peace within his soul. Forgiveness is never simple, but it is the first step toward healing and starting anew. Throughout his journey in search of meaning, Alexander realized that to find purpose, he had to accept what had happened in the past. He had to forgive his mistakes and learn to live with the choices he had made. This story reminds us that no one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes forgiveness is the most important step in moving forward. Forgiving oneself is not just an act of liberation, but a way to resolve the burdens within and allow oneself to be free. Ultimately, the journey to rediscover life, overcoming death and fear, is not just a story about one man's life. It is a lesson on love, sacrifice, choice, and forgiveness. This story teaches us that no matter how great the challenges we face, true love always endures, and forgiveness is the key to freeing ourselves from the pain of the past. Thank you for accompanying Alexander on his journey to find the meaning of life. May this story bring you valuable lessons on living fully in the present and the future, and on the power of love and forgiveness in healing the wounds of the heart. Remember, no matter how many challenges life throws our way, we always have the power to choose our own path.
The content of this story has been edited by our editorial team based on a true story. The names of the characters have been changed to protect their privacy and identity.